Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Naririnig ba ako? Okay. Nag-reply naman na si Jericho Ignacio. Okay. So, I believe we can start now. So, let me just start sharing my screen. Okay. So, okay. So, I believe you can see my screen right now. So, okay, so last time we discussed uh, implicit differentiation, implicit differentiation, and certain applications of derivatives. So far, these things that we have discussed last time, they're just very brief, no? So very mababaw lang pala sila ng application natin. So, and last time I've checked your seat work, no? So there are certain things that we need to again refresh your memory on, no? So okay, so let me clarify certain things first, no? So remember uh, that when we discuss implicit differentiation, we find expressions or equations, no, that is expressed using the y and the x variable. Okay, so remember that as in this class, no, we will always treat y as a function of x. Okay, and we know that the derivative of y with respect to x give us gives us f prime of x. No, so this is the definition of that. Okay, so the derivative of y with respect to x is just f prime of x. Okay, so for the implicit differentiation, remember that when you differentiate y, no, so when you differentiate y, it will give you dy dx. Okay, remember that. Okay. So let's say we have y squared plus x squared equals a squared. I believe this is part of the sequence, no? So when we say we want to find the dy dx for this equation, no, we apply the derivative operator on both sides. Okay? Now, what's important in this case is to notice which of these functions is dependent to the variable that you're taking the derivative with respect to. So what I'm trying to say is, for example, pag tinignan niyo yung equation nyo, papansin nyo si y, meron kang may y, may x, may a. Ngayon, tatanungin yung sarili nyo, nagdi-derivative kayo with respect to x. So, sino dito sa mga to yung dependent kay x? Diba? Yun ang una niyong tatanungin kasi nagdi-derivative kayo with respect to x. So, sino dyan yung dependent kay x? So, ang sagot dyan, diba? Sabi natin kanina, yung y is a function of x. Okay? And therefore, si y, dapat, pag tinake ko yung derivative dapat ni y, or in this case, y squared, dapat ang magiging sagot ko dyan ay 2, 2y muna. So, taking the derivative of y squared, and then you take dy dx. Okay? So, this is the common mistake that I have seen in your seat works, no? So, always remember na when you take the derivative of a certain variable, no? Basically, a dependent variable on a certain argument that it has. Basically, y as a function of x. So x is the argument, no? It is dependent on x. You must include the derivative of that variable with respect to the independent variable, which is dy dx. Intindihan? No? So I will not discuss this anymore, no? Pero make sure na when you take implicit derivatives, no? When you're looking for dy dx, for example, in this case, so let's just continue solving for this one, no? So ddx of y squared plus x squared equals to ddx of a squared. We know that a is a constant. Diba? Sinasabi natin lagi yan na gumagamitan tayo ng a, b, c is usually as a constant. No? So, what's the derivative of a with respect to x? No, dahil constant si a, by the constant rule, no? Constant rule, we know that this term, no, is equals to 0. Indian. So, pag constant derivative ng constants, always 0. Then therefore, the equation will be, okay, so ddx of y squared plus ddx of x squared equals to 0. And we know, again, from our implicit differentiation rule that this must be equal to 2y dy dx plus the derivative of x squared with respect to x is just 2x equals to 0. And then solving, okay, so the last step always is solving for dy dx because you're looking for the derivative of y with respect to x. So the answer will be dy dx equals to negative 2x over 2y. Or basically, it's negative x over y. Yan kasi nag-divide nyo yung 2 eh. Okay? So now, in my seat works, no, na that I have given you, I asked you to find the second derivative. No? So dito karamihan, almost all of you may errors when it comes to calculating the second derivative. No? But as we have discussed long time ago, no, the second derivative, no, so d squared y dx squared, it's just this derivative of the first derivative, no? This is how you define the derivative, no? So when you are looking for the second derivative, just take the derivative of your answer, no, for the first derivative. So let's just write d dx negative x over y. And then you apply the quotient rule because you only have x over y, which is just a rational function, no? So you rewrite this as when you take the derivative, you take the y times the derivative of the first term, the numerator, no? So derivative of the numerator, just rewrite this as minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator divided by the square of the denominator. Okay? Simplifying these things, we find that this is negative y plus x dy dx over y squared. Okay? Tama ba yung sinulat ko? Okay, so I assume na wala naman. Sabi na may mali, no? So, simplifying this further, we know from our answer before that we have the first derivative. Now we have an expression or an equation for the first derivative. No, so this is the first derivative, and we know that dy dx, as we have solved before, is just negative x over y. So it goes to show, no, that we need just substitute negative x over y for the first derivative. Okay? And then simplifying further, we find that this is negative y minus x squared over y squared. And then, okay, a simple algebra will give you negative 1 over y plus x squared over y cubed. Okay, so this is your second derivative. Okay, so I hope no na medyo na-take in niyo yung mga concepts na in-apply natin, no? So basically, it's very simple. You just need to always include a factor of y prime or dy dx when you're taking the derivative of y raised to any number. Okay? So basically, when you do this, here's the general rule. You'll gain the following. Okay? So basically, it's just the power rule, no, for any function u of x, no, is very similar to this. So all along, this is what we're doing, no? Okay, so I hope medyo nalinawan na kayo again regarding implicit differentiation, no? So if you have any questions regarding that, you may ask me, no? But for now, we'll proceed with the next topic, no? So let me brush you up again regarding the topics we have discussed. So far we have discussed certain applications of derivatives, starting with the average and instantaneous rates of change. We've also discussed motion along a line, displacement, velocity, speed, and acceleration. And I believe we ended on defining speed, acceleration, and instantaneous velocity and average velocity. No? So for today, we'll be discussing the following. So we'll be discussing maxima and minima, critical points, and extreme values of functions. Okay, so let me start with a theorem. Okay, so a theorem, or also known as the min-max. Okay, let's just call it the max-min. Max-min theorem for continuous functions. Okay, so what does the max-min theorem stands for? No, so what does it give? If f is continuous, okay, at every point of a closed interval I, okay, so we denote the closed interval as I, then the function f assumes both an absolute maximum, okay, we denote this absolute maximum as capital M, okay, let me just write it that way, and an absolute minimum value, because this is a minimum value, let's just denote it as small m, somewhere in I. Okay? Okay? That is there are numbers x1 and x2 in I with f of x1 is equals to small m and f of x2 is equals to capital M, and that small m bounds the function f of x with the large M for every other x in I. So the Max Min theorem is a mouthful theorem, no? So, but ano ba sinasabi ng Max Min theorem, no? So, sinasabi na dito na if you have a continuous function, no, f, okay, so it is important to know, note na dapat yung function nyo is continuous. And long before, we have defined, no? I have discussed with you kung paano ba natin malalaman na isang function is continuous, no? So we have 3 requirements for that, no? If you remember that, no? So we have 3 requirements, and of course, you need to make sure that the function you're working with passes those requirements, no? So dapat kompleto sila doon. Lahat 'yun dapat na-check nila. Okay? So I believe if you remember, the function must have a limit, no? So dapat yung limit niya on both sides is equal, and then that's for a given interval, and that the limit approaches a certain value. So that's important. Okay? So that value must be finite. No? Remember that. So if f is continuous at every point on a closed interval, no, sorry, may rewrite A, on a closed interval I, okay, then f assumes both an absolute maximum m and an absolute minimum value small m somewhere in I. That is, there are numbers x1 and x2 that gives us the value, the absolute minimum value and the absolute maximum value between where the function f of x is between those values for every other x in I. So let me give you a visualization for that, no? So let's say this is a function f, no? F of x. And sabi niya, okay, let me give you a closed interval. So this is the closed interval. Okay? This is the closed interval. Okay? This is the I. Okay? This is your I. Then, nasabi niya dito, yung function daw na f of x, okay, let me just redraw this f of x. Okay? Let me do yeah, something like that. Okay? So, sinasabi niya dito na dapat daw si f, mayroon siyang maximum and minimum value, okay, within this range. Okay? Sinasabi natin na if this is your x-axis, di ba? Ito yung x-axis, ito yung y-axis. Okay? Your function f of x for this given interval I, no? There must be an absolute maximum and absolute minimum. Okay? So when we say absolute maximum, that's the maximum that you can yeah, from its name itself, no? So yun yung pinaka mataas na value ng y na makukuha mo. And then it assures you by the Max Min theorem that there is also an absolute minimum, pinakamalit na value ng y na makukuha mo. And those numbers are given by x1 and x2. In this case, no, based sa ating diagram, no, so our plot or graph, whatever you want it to call, no. So in this case, this must be your maximum, no, capital M, absolute maximum, and this one must be your absolute minimum or your small m. And those values are given by f of x2 and f of x1. Okay? So it is assured, okay, no? Ay, hindi pala dyan dapat nakatapat dito dapat. Okay? It is we are assured by this theorem that there must be an absolute maximum and an absolute minimum. Okay? So yung sinasabi ng theorem na to, if you have a given interval for a given function, there's always an absolute maximum and there's always an absolute minimum. Okay? Yeah. So what are the typical scenarios, no? For certain functions that we may encounter. So hindi naman lahat ng functions are continuous, no? So let's try to look at certain examples of continuous functions, no? For example, you have a certain function, no? And its graph looks like this. Okay? So it's, as you can see, it's somehow similar to the one that I have drawn, no? So as you can see, no? For this function, we have on the point x2 and the point x1, the absolute maximum and the absolute minimum, respectively. And the coordinates of this absolute maximum and absolute minimum are given by the following. So as you can see, this is x2, capital M, where capital M is a value of y. And then for the minimum, we have these coordinates, no? So let's say it is given by the interval between A and B. Okay. So in this case, our interval is A and B. This is how you write an interval. Okay. And the absolute maximum, okay, can be found at point x2, and the absolute minimum can be found on x1. And as you can see, both these values, no, okay, x1 and x2 is bounded by the interval A and B, no? So we can see from this case, no, that the maximum and minimum are found at interior points of the interval. Okay, so that's the case for this one. Okay, another case, no, is when you have a function like this. No, so again, it is bounded by between A and B. So our interval I is A and B. So as you can see, this is a closed interval, no. So when you have square brackets, it means closed. No? And when you have parentheses, it is open. Okay, in this case, we have a closed. So the maximum, as you can see from this case, no, when you're given interval and the function looks like this, then the maximum, capital M, and the minimum, small m, okay, for a function f of x, is found at the endpoints, no? So mapapansin nyo, mas mataas tong point na to kaysa sa point na to. And therefore, the maximum and the minimum can be found, okay, the maximum and minimum are found at the endpoints, okay? So far what we have discussed is that we can find the maximum and minimum at interior points, or we can find them at the endpoints of the interval, no? So that's important. Next, okay, let's consider another case. So let's say you have a function that looks like this, and for the interval A, B. So as you can see, we only have a maximum, no? Meron lang tayong maximum value that we can have for y. Okay? For y is a function of x, no? So how do we define this? So for a given interval A and B, the maximum at interior point and minimum at endpoint, no? So ganito natin dinidescribe yung mga functions, no? When we're talking about maximum and minimum. No? As you can see, for this case, we have a maximum at the interior point and minimum at the endpoint, no? So it didn't include a value for x1 in here because it's found at the endpoints naman. But there are certain cases na, for example, in this diagram, no, as you can see, parang mas mababa dito kaysa dito, no? So either of the two yan, usually. So pwedeng, kasi ang case mo naman is reflected by that, no? Pwedeng ganito naman yung case. Nasa A naman yung, nasa B naman yung mas mababa. So I didn't try to, include the x of 1, no? But it goes either way na you have a maximum at an interior point and you can have a minimum at an endpoint. Okay? So for the last case, no, we can have a function that looks like this. Okay? Again, bounded by A and p, and this is m x y. Okay, yeah. So this is your function y f of x, and from here we can find, or particularly in this case, we have a minimum at interior point and maximum at endpoint. No? Okay, so similar with the case before, we can either have the maximum on this side or on this side, no? So kasi we can have a function that looks like this again, no? So it's like the reflected case of the it's the reflected case of what we have drawn here, no? So I didn't include x sub 2 as well because it can be found on either endpoint of the graph or the interval that we're considering, no? So far, I have introduced to you 4 typical scenarios on wherein we can find the maximum and the minimum of a function for a given interval, no? So, for example, we have a function, okay, y is equals to x squared, no? When we plot y is equals to x squared, we know that, for example, this is 1 and 1, no? So this is the interval that you're considering. So ano kayang case nito kapag ganito yung kino-consider natin? Paano kaya natin i-describe yung function na 'to? May nakakaalam ba kung paano natin i-describe function na 'to? Kung ano yung nasaan yung maximum and minimum niya? May makakapag sabi ba sa'kin kung anong klaseng ano 'to, maximum and minimum meron ng y is equals to x squared, where I is equals to -1, 1? Anyone in the class? Hello? Can someone tell me kung anong klaseng maximum and minimum meron ang y is equals to x squared for the interval -1, 1? Hello? Hello? Wala bang makakapagsabi sa'kin diyan? Okay, I'll just call, um, Diamond Grace Rico. Can you tell me anong klaseng maximum and minimum points meron dito sa y is equals to x squared for the interval -1, 1? Hello? Okay, mukhang walang gustong sumagot sa'kin. Anyways, let's proceed na siguro, no? So, if wala, no? So, walang nakakaalam kung anong klaseng maximum and minimum points meron ng y is equals to x squared. So, it is important to just simply look at a graph, no? As you can see, when we're talking about maximum and minimum, we are considering the values of y that the function can take. So, ulitin natin, no? So, gusto nating malaman dito kung ano yung value, pinakamataas or pinakamaliit, pinakamababa na value na iti-take ng function mo for a given interval. So, as you can see, in our graph, no? So, ang pinakamataas, syempre, yung kung saan napuputol yung graph, no? So, siya napuputol. Kasi ito yung interval mo, di ba? Yung interval mo. Let me just colorize this, no? Para makita nyo. So, ito yung interval mo. Yan, di ba? In x. So, as always, yung interval is given in terms of x, no? Nakikita mo dapat yung interval sa x-axis. Ngayon, yung maximum value mo, kung saan napuputol yung graph. Pag nag-drawing ka dapat ng line dyan, no? So, saan napuputol yung graph? Sa y-axis. And then, hahanapin mo kung saan siya napuputol sa baba. Okay? Kung saan tumatama yung mga lines na yon, as you can see in here, no? For this case, where y is equals to x squared, the maximum can be found at the endpoints. Okay? Kasi ito yung dalawang, no? Yung highest value of y that you can have. In that case, ano yung mga values na yon? Let's say, this is your x1 and this is your x2, no? Okay? So for y, the value of x1, you have a value of 1, and y, at point x2, you have, again, 1. No? So y of 1 is equals to 1, and y of 1, again, y of negative 1, y of negative 1 is equals to 1, and y of 1 is equals to 1. Both of these two are called maximums. No? These are the absolute maximum you can have for this interval. And then, no, for this case, no, let's call this x3. For y of x3, we have a value of 0. No? We have a value of 0 wherein y of 0 is equals to 0. Then therefore, this must be the minimum. Okay? Okay? Naintindihan ba? Ano sumasagot?
Medyo po, sir.
Okay. Ayun. Naintindihan ba, Philip? May tanong ka ba, Philip, regarding this discussion? Ano yung bakit medyo lang? Hello? Ba't nawala na si Philip? Parang hindi na nagsasalita si Philip.
Later na lang po, sir.
Later na lang. Okay. So let me just repeat, no? So pag sinabi natin maximum and minimum, yung maximum, siya yung pinakamataas na value ng y na makukuha mo, no? Kapag nag-plug ka ng certain value. So yung maximum, yung pinakamataas na value ng y. So hanapin mo lang kung saan napuputol yung graph. No? Titignan mo lang yung y. Magdodrawing ka lang ng line kung saan siya tumatama. No? So as you can see, yung value na yun is y is equals to 1. Diba? So yun yung maximum. And then for the minimum, titingnan mo yung pinakamababa, di ba? So titingnan mo, simula taas, pababa yung mata mo, titingnan mo lang, okay, nandito yung zeros. Hanggang dyan lang yung graph. So automatically, yung minimum niya is y of 0 is equals to 0. So, describing this function, we can call this as a maximum at endpoint, no? And minimum maximums, no? Even maximums. Minimum at interior point, no? So this is how you describe the maximum and the minimum of a function for a given interval. Okay, so let's continue, no? So do you have any questions? Okay, so wala na naman tanong, okay? Let's proceed. So let me give another example, no? Example. Let's say we have a given interval, so negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, okay? The function is f of x cosine x, okay? So I believe alam niyo na kung paano mag-plot ng function, no? For example, trigonometric functions, no? So let me just refresh you. Okay? Pangit sa sulat. Anyways, you have a straight line. Okay. Okay. So a trigonometric function can take the values for y, 1 and negative 1, and the Hello? Naririnig na ba ako ulit? Hello?
Po, sir.
Yes po,
Okay.
sir.
Okay na hindi na robot?
Hindi na po.
Okay. So, saan banda nag-robot yung boses ko? Okay. Sa part na to?
Yung sa graph na po, sir.
Okay, sige. Okay, so ulitin ko, no? So when plotting trigonometric functions, no? So the y-axis is simply just the real line, okay? An element of a real line. So when you write the interval, no? So ito yung mga tick marks mo for y. Hello? Hello? Choppy pa ba? Okay na. So, when writing the interval for the y-axis is just -1, 1, no? So, yun lang usually nilalagay natin for trigonometric functions when plotting trigo. And then for the x-axis, it's just the multiple of n pi over 4. Usually, it's n pi over 4, no? So, where n is an element of the natural numbers. Sino yung naka-on yung mic? Sino yun? Okay, so wala naman na mute. Anyways, going back. So when you're writing the interval, no, you take the values, no, for n is an element of the natural numbers. So first, you take when n is equals to 0, it's just 0, and pi over 4 is equals to 0. When n is equals to 1, it's just pi over 4. Then when n is equals to 2, it's just 2 pi over 4, or simply pi over 2. And then n is equals to 3, that's 3 pi over 4. And then when n is equals to 4, it's just simply pi. Okay, so that's the interval on the right-hand side of the x-axis. So this is pi over 2. Oh, let me just rewrite this as 2 pi over 4 para tingin malito. And then 3 pi over 4. And then pi. So when this is the value on the right-hand side, this must be the case again for the left-hand side. Just flip the signs. Then a negative 3 pi over 4. Extend here, negative pi. Now, our function is the cosine of x. No? So, pag plinat na natin siya dito, it is important that you consider first the interval. No? The given interval is negative pi over 2 and the positive pi over 2. So, the equivalent value for this is just 90 degrees. 90 degrees and negative 90 degrees. Okay? So, let's plot this, no, for the given interval. And we know that pi over 2 is just 2 pi over 4. Or this is the, on the right-hand side, this is the endpoint on the right hand, and this is the another endpoint on the left-hand side. So when we plot the cosine of x, no, so what does the value of cosine for x is equals to 0? Cosine of 0 is just equals to 1. Okay? And then cosine of pi over 4 is just equivalent to what? Hello? Nakakaalam ba ng cosine of pi over 4 o cosine 90? Ay, cosine 45? Yung nakakaalam ng cosine 45. Okay,
Ano
so
po ulit,
mukhang,
sir?
ano ang value ng cosine pi over 4? What is cosine pi over 4? Di ba special angles to? Cosine pi over 4 is just square root of 2 over 2. Okay? Square root of 2 over 2 is around here kasi ang square root of 2 is around approximately 1.41. Pag dinivide nyo ba ito yan, 0.7, so around here. And then, cosine of 2 pi over 4 or cosine pi over 2 or cosine 90, basically, this is just the y value, no? So that's 0. Okay? So as you can see, nakompleto na natin sa kanang side. And then for the left side, no? So remember, no? As I've told you long ago, there are functions that we consider as an odd function, No, for this case, this is an odd function and an even function. No? So among the trigonometric functions, no, this is an odd function and this is an even. No? An odd function, an odd trigonometric function is the sine function. Okay? And then we have cosine function as an even function. Okay? Why is that? No? So, pag sinabi nating even, so for example, pag nag-take ako ng value ng cosine negative x, then that's just cosine x kasi even nga siya. Nag-sine naman, sine of negative x, we have negative sine of x, no? So, this means na kapag nag-plug ako ng negative values for cosine, that value is equivalent to the value of cosine when we plug in the positive value of x. So, basically, it's just the reflection of the left-hand side of the axis is just the reflection of the right-hand side. And it goes to show na the plot must look like this. Ayan, pangit. Okay. Ulitin natin. Okay, ulit. Yan. Yan. Okay, so that's the plot of y equals to cosine x. No? So now, how would we describe the maximum and the minimum values of this function for the given interval? As you can see, okay, so simplistically, this is how, okay, let me just do that. So this is how your y is equals to cosine x looks like. So as you can see, no, pag nag-drawing ulit tayo ng dash lines dito and then dash lines dyan kung saan naputol yung mga in graph, so you can see the maximum value that the y cosine of x can take is 1 and the minimum value that y equals to cosine of x can take is 0. Diba? 0 siya. Ito yung minimum. Ito yung maximum. So ito yung capital M. Ito yung minimum. Now, how are you going to describe this function in terms of words? So, as you can see, yung maximum value mo, yung capital M mo, which is this point, is interior to the interval, where the interval, I, is given by negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. So, capital M is interior, and then you write maximum is at interior pala, wala nang is. Maximum at interior point, and then minimum at endpoints. Diba? Bakit? Kasi dalawa yung minimum mo, and yung minimum mo can be found at the end points, no? So the end points basically is just the values of the interval. Intindihan? Intindihan ba? Kung paano din i-describe? Okay, sabi ni Matthew nagets daw. Okay? So walang questions ha? Okay? So let me proceed with another example, no? So again, we will consider trigonometric functions. Okay. Yan. So, for the next case, okay? Oh my God. Okay, let me just clean this up. Okay, malinis na ulit. So again, let's consider the interval negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. But now the function f of x is just sine of x. So let's plot, no? So for example, we have the x here, get a table of values, sine of x, and then so for the interval we have 0. Let's just start with 0, no? 0, pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 4 pi over 2, and then 3 pi over 4, and then pi. And then, so napansin nyo, hindi ko na sinulat yung negative kasi as before, no? F of x, sine of x is an odd function, meaning Ang meaning ng add function, when we take a negative value of x, it's just the negative of the positive value of the function. So sine of x at 0, no? So what's the value of that, no? Remember, when we're considering trigonometric functions, it's just considering the unit circle, okay? So this is 0, and this is pi over 2. So for the sine values, you're considering the y, or this, this different y prime, no? Let's say y prime, yeah. So for 0, when the angle is 0, there is no sine value. Okay, naintindihan? So there's also sine of x. For x is 0, it's just 0. And when it's pi over 4, or the 45-degree angle, no? It's just equivalent to what? Square root of 2 over 2. And now for the pi over 2, it's just equals to 1. Ano ang sagot? And then 3 pi over 4, equivalent to what? Ano ang 3 pi over 4? 3 pi over 4 equals to, 3 pi muna is equivalent to 540 degrees. Okay? 2, 12, 4, 2, 1 pala. 4, and then 5. So tama naman. So it's 135 degrees. So 135 degrees is just simply negative square root of 2 over 2. Okay? So ayan, nakita nyo kung paano siya kino-compute, paano nalalaman, no? So sinulat lang natin yan para makita nyo. So when we're plotting this, no? Simulan natin sa right side muna. When x is equals to 0, sine of x equals to 0. And when x is equals to pi over 4, no? Ito yung pi over 4 nyo. Then it's equals to square root of 2 over 2. And again, square root of 2 over 2 is just around 0.7, no? So dito siya banda. Okay. And then when x is equals to 2 pi over 4, it's just 1. No? Your function takes the value of 1. And now, since this is the end of the interval, no? So that's how far you'll get. Okay. And now for the left side of the function, we know again, we use this argument, no? It's just the negative. So basically, for any values on the right side, you just take the negative side of it. So this is the positive x, this must be the negative x, no? So this is the region where you're plotting the values. And then, so for the negative value, so this is square root of 2 over 2, right? Square root of 2 over 2, and then pi over 4. No, baliktad. Pi over 4, square root of 2 over 2, and this is pi over 2, tama, pi over 2, comma 1. So when you change the value, the x values to the negative values, you just find that this is just a negative square root. Let me write this. Square root of 2, negative 5, pi over 4. And then the last value is just this one, where it is negative pi over 2 and negative 1. Okay? Okay. Tama ba? Yes, tama naman. Okay. So, let's connect the dots. Ayan. Pangit. Tignan. Ayan, much better. No, so this is what the function y is equals to sine of x looks like. Okay? So now, let's describe that in terms of its maximum and minimum values. No, let's change the color. No. Okay? Ang pangit. Ang pangit.
Excuse me po.
Yes?
May ask lang po ako. Di ba po pag 3 pi over 4, yung sin x po dun ay positive square root of 2 over 2. Hindi po negative kasi cosine po yung negative dun sa 3 pi over 4.
What? Ano yung pakiulit ngayon tanong?
Yung sa taas po, sir. Pwede ba?
Mhm.
Yung sa may 3 pi over 4 po, di ba po sin x? Di ba po dapat positive square root?
Ah, oh, yes. Sorry. Sorry, pasensya. Mali na sulat. Okay. Sino yun? Anong name mo?
Manggiyat po, sir.
Okay. Mabuti naman at nakikinig si Mang Giyat, no? So, note na lang natin. Okay. So, meron pa ba akong na mali na sulat? No? Okay, so thank you very much, Mang Giyat, no, for correcting me. Okay? So, yun. So, bakit positive? No? So, bakit positive? Kasi, we're considering only the first and the second quadrants, no? So, looking back at the circle, no? So, you can see, this is 135 degrees, this is 45 degrees. Both will have a y value that is positive. Okay? So, ayun, thank you very much. No? Anyway, so, I believe, okay, no, Manggia. Okay, so if there are no more corrections, let's proceed. So, for y is equals to sine of x, no? So, this is your y is equals to sine of x, no? And the interval is pi over 2 and negative pi over 2. How are we going to describe the maximum and the minimum values of this function? So, the maximum, okay, no? So, you have, what's the maximum value? The maximum value is positive 1. As you can see, no? So, ito yung pinakataas, ito yung pinakababa. So, the maximum value is 1. So, this is your capital M. Okay? And your small m is gonna be negative 1. No? Kasi siya yung pinakamababang value na nakuha nyo. Sa lahat ng values na meron si y equals to sine of x for the interval negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, we find that the capital M is just 1 and then small m, or the absolute minimum, is negative 1. Therefore, we describe the function y is equals to sine of x for the interval negative pi over 2 and pi over 2 as having maximum at endpoint. Tama ba? An endpoint, yeah. Correct. An endpoint and minimum at an endpoint, no? Okay? So, pag, for example, for a seat work that I'll be giving you, so as you can see, you can just describe the function by doing these things, no? So, you simply need to plot the function, no? You need to know the values of the function and you plot it. And then you can just describe the values for the capital M and small m, and then you write the description as maximum at an endpoint and minimum at an endpoint, something like that, no? So as you can see, the typical cases that we have considered before, is very much the usual cases that we are encountering so far, no? So you can see we have these typical cases are the maximum and minimum as interior points, the maximum and minimum as endpoints, no? So this is the case for the sine of x. And then we have the maximum at interior point and minimum at an endpoint, no? So this is the case for the cosine of x for the interval negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. So now, as a seat work, no, let me give you a seat work that you need to pass, no, later. So make sure, again, na maganda yung screenshot nyo or yung pagkaka-PDF nyo, no? So the interval, no, I'll be giving an interval. So negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. And then the function is, so this is number 1, f of x is equals to secant of x. And then number 2, the interval is negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, where the function is cosecant of x. The number 3, the interval is 0 and 1. This is just the f of x is equals to x cubed plus x squared. And then 4, the interval must be -1, 1, where the f of x is equals to 1 over x plus 2. Okay. So number 5, the interval is -2 and 3, where the function is e to the x plus 1. Okay? So this is your sheet work, and I need you to pass this okay, before the day ends na siguro, no? So before 8 p.m., no? So same same format, same thing, template ng names, no? Okay. So this is the sheet work. Okay? So let me just remark on the following, no? So it is important requirement, no, that the interval must be closed. Okay? And that the function that we are considering must be continuous. Okay? So I'll be illustrating why this is important, no? So it is important because even a single point of discontinuity, no? So even a single point of discontinuity, sana magkasya. Okay, kasya. Okay, can keep a function from having either a maximum or a minimum value on a closed interval, no? So we have stated long ago, okay, so actually the start of the class, that the Max Min theorem requires us to have a function that is continuous and have a closed interval. Then therefore, no, when we have a point of discontinuity, no, these are the points that we have considered before, no, that the value of the function usually is not defined, no, or sometimes these points are cut off, no, so wala siya dun sa function. Okay, yung value na yon hindi siya defined usually. So we call that a point of discontinuity. And then this point of discontinuity can cause us not to find any maximum or minimum value, no? So ayun. So let's consider some examples, no? For example, we have a case of y is equals to x. The very simplistic function y is equals to x. And then, but the interval is given as 0 is less than x and x is less than 1, no? So as you can see, the interval, no, looking at this interval, the interval is open. Okay? So when we say open, no, as you can see, we can rewrite this as a sort of a parenthesis, no? So not to be confused with coordinates, no? So not to be confused with coordinates. Let me note that. Hindi kasha. Ay, wait. No? As you can see, the y is equals to x has an interval I of 0 between 0 and 1, where 0 and 1 is not included, no, in the function. So how do we plot this graph? No? So we have 0 over here, 1 over here, and 1 over here. So when the function is y is equals to x, so simply when x is 1, then y is 1. But since the interval is open on both endpoints, we can draw it something like this. Okay, let me change the colors. This is the color. Okay. As you can see, the interval is open, and in between is a straight line. So now, when you're asked, what is the maximum value of this function for this given interval? And the answer is, there is no largest value. Okay? And then when you're asked, so what is the minimum value of this function for the given interval? The answer is no smallest value Or in terms of maximum, minimum, no maximum value and no minimum value. Okay? Bakit? Bakit ganon? Kasi nga, yung Max Min theorem, no? So let me just flash it on the screen again, no? The Max Min theorem asks us to find a function that is continuous on a closed interval. But the given interval is open on both endpoints. Meaning the Max Min theorem does not hold for this function. Okay? So yun yung idea niya. Kapag hindi niya na-surpass yung requirement na dapat, continuous yung function, and dapat close yung interval mo, then therefore, the function does not have a maximum or minimum, no? But still, you have to check. Okay? Kasi there are cases that we will be considering again, no? Something like this, no? So, for example, you have another function, y is equals to x plus 1, no? Y is equals to x plus 1 when the interval is given by -1 is less than or equal x and less than 0, and 0 when x equals to 0, and the function takes the value y is equals to x minus 1 when the interval is 0 less than x and x is less than or equal to 1. So now, as you can see, parang pag tinignan mo yung function, no, pag tinignan mo yung interval niya, para siyang closed. No? Para siyang closed. Kasi, mapapansinin mo dito, pag sinulat nyo to, pag nire-write niya, it's something like square brackets, -1, kasi, papansinin nyo, kapag nagsusulat tayo ng square brackets, kapag yung cases lang na may equal, okay, less than or equal, no, tsaka lang siya closed bracket. Kapag wala siyang equal, so open lang yon. So you write this as something like that, no? So square brackets, -1, 0. In this case, this is not an interval, but a point, which is 0. And then, for the other side, no, so this is 0, open, 0, and +1, closed. No? As you can see, para siyang kumpleto kasi syempre, -1, 0, na-cover niya, then 0, kinover niya din, and then yung 0, tsaka 1. No? So, pag titignan mo, parang yung totality ng buong interval mo is closed. But, if we try, no, to plot this, no, okay, we will find the following. Okay, so let's start with the first case, no? For the interval -1 and 0. So this is -1, okay, -1, and this is 0. And then you see the function y is described by y is equals to x plus 1. So meaning when x is 0, y is 1, no? This is 1. Okay. So your function looks like this. Okay, mamaya natin lagyan. But on -1, then y is equals to 0. So it is interesting to note that the interval is closed for -1. So meaning, dito siya. Okay? Mag-close. And then sa 0 siya, mag-open. So when y is equals to 0, saka siya open. Okay? So this is the function y is equals to x plus 1. And now, for the next case, we have 0 when x equals to 0. Then just simply 0 over here. And then, for the next case, we have y is equals to x minus 1. So as you can see, the interval is open when x is equals to 0. So meaning, open siya dito sa side na to. Okay? Open. And then, closed siya kapag yung x is equals to 1. So, draw this as something like this. Okay. So now, you can see na the function is not continuous. Okay? So you cannot draw the graph without lifting your pen. Okay? So, now, tatanungin na kayo, nasaan ngayon yung maximum and minimum points? So, again, so yung ginagawa natin usually, so titingnan yung pinakamataas na value ng y, no? Pinakamataas na value ng y, tatama siya dito, and pinakamababa nandito. Okay? But as you can see, the graph is discontinuous at this point when x is equals to 0 for the case of the interval -1 and 0. So, we can say from this fact that the graph or the function itself has no highest point. No? And then, when we're looking for the minimum, we can say that the graph has no lowest point. No? Or as we can say, the graph has no maximum value and no minimum value. No? So, ano sinasabi nitong mga to? So, sinasabi lang nito again na it is important to check whether the interval is closed or open. No? So, when it is closed, we can find the Max Min theorem to hold, no? Maybe. But still, we need to check whether the function is continuous. So, when we found that the interval is closed and the function is continuous, only then that we can apply the Max Min theorem. No? So that's the idea of the Max Min theorem. So, are there questions regarding the Max Min theorem? Hello? Hello? Are there questions? Clarifications regarding the topic? Hello? Wala na? Anong tanong? Wala naman po. Okay. So, I think we can proceed, no, with the local and absolute global minima. Okay, so I think we can try to squeeze a little bit of introduction, no? So regarding the local and absolute. So now let's move on to the local versus absolute, or also known as the global and extrema. Okay? So when we say local and global, ay local versus absolute or global extrema. No? When we say local, no, so for example, you have a certain object, no? Okay? And you lay out a grid. No? May grid ka dyan, for example, no? Or what we call as the coordinates. No? So the coordinates is PQ. Let's say, no? So the coordinates PQ. When we say local, local means small portion, no? Like very small. For example, this one. No? So this square, yan. Itong grid na yan. So this rectangle, no? So let's call this A prime. A prime is a local. No? Local coordinate. No? So pag naglagay ako dito ng, for example, ano ba? For example, ganyan, klaseng coordinates. Yan, may ganyan coordinates ako dyan. A prime has a local coordinate, no? And the global coordinate, for example, is A. No? So that's the difference between them. So as you can see, A prime is the coordinates that A prime has is much smaller than that of A. No? So basically, another example is when you look at a paper, no, a sheet of paper, and you look, pag tinignan mo yung paper, overall, the paper looks very white, no? White lang siya and everything. But when you look closer, no, pag tinignan mo maigi, hindi siya pure white. No? Meron siya, may mga patches siya na mga malilit na ganyan, no? So, as you can see, that's the difference between a local and a global. No? So, local means you can see the finer details, no? Smaller details or microscopic description of the item or the object or something else. But for the global, you can see the overall structure. No? So that's the idea. It's a global, it's the overall, and when it's local, it's the smaller description of an item. So now, let me introduce you to what we call the absolute extreme values. No? So let's define this thing. Absolute extreme values. So, what does absolute extreme values mean? So let f be a function with domain D then F has an absolute maximum value on D at point C if the f of x is much less than or equal to f of C for all x in D. Okay? And then an absolute minimum value on D at C if f of x is much greater than or equal to f of C for all x in D. Okay. So we have defined the following. No? So an absolute extreme value is a value of a function in domain D, no? Wherein it satisfies the following. It is a maximum when the function evaluated at C at point C is less than or equal f of x. For all x is an element of D, and it is a minimum value, an absolute minimum value at C when the function evaluated at C is less than or equal to the function of x. For all x, an element of D. So as you can see, parang mahirap siya, no? Parang hindi mo maintindihan. But this is just the definition of absolute extreme values, no? So visualizing these things, no? So a maximum is simply, as we mentioned before, it is the highest point, no? So this is, for example, this is C. This is just C, and this is your f of x. And as you can see, at this point, we call this point as f of C. Then looking at everything, no? So pag tinignan niyo itong function na to, you can see that the value of f of C, no, is greater than f of x for all x. No? Kasi, mapansin nyo, yung C, yung value niya, yung nakuha niya ng f of C, for any value less than, for example, ito, letter B. Diba? If you take the point B, so this must be f of B, and you can see na mas mataas pa rin yung f of C. So f of C is greater than f of B. Now let's take another point. Let's call this f of A. No? As you can see, f of B is much greater than f of A, and f of B is much greater than, less than f of C. And therefore, if we continue this process, no, of finding other points, no, that is less than, no, to the left of f of C, we can find that f of C is greater than or can be equal, no, to f of x, and thus f of C is an absolute maximum. No? Ayun yung gusto niya sabihin na dapat lahat ng values ng x, no? Lahat ng values ng x aside kay C, no? Pag binag mo siya sa function, yung makukuha mong value is much less than doon sa f of C. Okay? So let's take an example, no? Para mas maganda. Again, let's consider the simplistic function y is equals to x squared. Para maganda. So the interval that we're working on is 0 and 1 lang. No? So you can see the interval again is closed and the function is continuous for that interval, and then we can apply the Max Min theorem. No? So this is the x, this is the y. So pag blinan natin yung function, this is 0, this is 1, so this is the plot. No? As you can see, no? Ano kaya dito yung maximum value? No? The maximum value for this case, as you can see, is when x is equals to 1. No? And let's call this C. No? Now, as you can see, f of C, or simply x equals to 1, gives us 1. Now, are we sure that this is the maximum? Is the maximum or absolute maximum, no? For that case, the absolute maximum. Now, let's check. So let's consider now points less than C. No? For example, x sub I. No? So let's say x sub I or okay, no, so x sub I. No. Let's do this way. I 1, 2, 3. And x sub I. So let's say, ano yun? Kaninong mic yun? Sino yun? Okay. So wala na. Anyways, going back, no? So let's say, for I is equals to 1, no? Or x sub I, we take the point 0.7. 0.7. And then for x sub 2, we have 0.5. And then x sub 3 is 0.3. Now, we want to see whether f of c is greater than f of 0.7 and f of c is greater than f of 0.5, f of c is greater than f of 0.3. We want to see whether this is true and see for ourselves whether f of c where c is just x equals to 1 is the absolute maximum. So now let's check. Our function is y is equals to x squared. No? So we know that your y is equals to f of x equals to 1 is equals to 1, and this is your point f of c. Let's check now for f of x equals to 0.7. No? So this is basically 0.7 squared. So what is 0.7 squared? Can anyone tell me? What is 0.7 squared? Anyone in the class, if you're listening? Okay. Sabi niya Labado, 0.49. Okay? Now, let's compare. Is f of c greater than 0.49? The answer is f of c greater than 0.49? Yes, the answer is yes. Okay? Which is true. Okay? True. Okay? Now, next, let's try y is equals to f of x equals to 0.5, or basically 0.5 squared. What is the square of 0.5? 0.25. Very good. So, which is greater, f of c, or so is this statement true? F of c is greater than f of 0.25? Yes, again, the answer is true because f of c is equals to 1 and f of 0.5 is just 0.25. So now, for the last part, let's consider f of x equals to 0.3. Then 0.3 squared equals to what? 0.09. Very good. So, question, is f of z greater than f of 0.3? Yes, again, so this is true. Now, if we continue this process indefinitely, like if we take any value less than c, no, we can see that there is no value of x, no, that when plugged or substitute for this in this function will give us a value greater than f of c. And thus, we say that the f of c, or where c is equals to 1, no, equals to 1, and therefore that this is an absolute maximum. Okay? So that's the idea of looking for an absolute value, no? So I think malino naman yun sa absolute maximum, no? Intindihan ba? Intindihan ba? Okay, so walang sumasagot. Okay, yes po. Okay. Okay. Now, let's try to look for the absolute minimum, no? So let's say we have a function. Our function is y is equals to negative x squared, where the interval negative 1 and 0. Okay? So, anong itsura nito? Ano ang itsura nito? No? Kanina, y is equals to x squared pataas. Ngayon, y is equals to negative x squared, no? So basically, it's just x squared and then gagawin nyo na negative lahat ng signs, no? So basically, kung yung x squared nakaganon, etong negative x squared nakaganon, nakayuko siya. So malungkot siya, no? So now, let's try, no? From negative 1 to 0, that's the interval that we're working with. So ano kaya plot neto? Siyempre, kung ang plot niya is ganito lang din. Okay? Yan kasi for any values of x, let's say x equals to negative 1, so negative 1 squared. Yan, okay, tama, pababa. Very good. Okay. So now, we have the same question again, no? So for this interval, let's say, okay, so tinignan natin yung graph. Sabi natin, okay, ang f of c po natin, sir, is equals to f of x equals to negative 1. Okay, ito po yung absolute maximum. But is this correct? No? So let's ask ourselves, no? So is this the absolute minimum? No? Okay, so now let's check. Let's take arbitrary points again. So let's say the first arbitrary point is just negative 0.7, negative 0.5. Okay, let me just write it slanted. 7, negative 0.5, and negative 0.3. And let's compare, no? So is f of z less than, no? Less than na kasi minimum, no? Less than, hindi na greater than. F of c less than negative f of negative 0.7. So let's check. So ngayon, i-plug natin. So ang function natin, y is equals to x squared, negative x squared. So this is negative 0.7 squared. So ano kaya sagot dito? What is a negative 0.7 squared? Anong value nito? Negative 0.49. So now, which is less than, no? Negative 1 or negative 0.49? Ano mas mababa? Negative 1 o negative 0.49? Okay, so sabi ni Evangelio, it's negative 1. So correct, no? Nakita natin na yung next immediate value, mas mababa yung f of c natin, no? So we can say na, okay, this must be a minimum. But still, let's check, no? So is f of c less than f of negative 0.5? No? So what is negative 0.5 squared? What's the value? Negative 0.25. Okay? So the question is f of c less than negative 0.25? Mababa ba siya? Mas mababa? Yes po. Okay, sabi ni Jericho, oh yes. So tama yun, no? So mas mababa siya. And then lastly, let's take f of c must be less than 2 f of negative 0.3. Okay? Mas mababa ba siya? So what is y is equals to negative 0.3 squared? No? Just negative what? Negative 0.09. And the question again is f of z less than f of negative 0.3? Is less than negative. So mas bababa ba siya? Okay, so true. So now, as you can see, no, we can see for ourselves that f of c, where c is negative 1, for the case of y is negative x squared, for this interval, that f of c, where c is equals to f of x equals to negative 1, this value gives us the absolute minimum. Okay? So yun yung idea no definition natin ng absolute extreme values, no? You must check, no, for all values of x, no? This is important. Now you check all values of x before or after, no? The point C on which you're checking the function, no? Kung siya ba yung maximum or minimum, siya ba yung absolute maximum or minimum. I-check nyo yung kada values na meron, no? For given interval. So that's the idea. Okay, so I think there's just 5 minutes left, no, for our class. No, so do you have any questions? Any question? Walang questions? None po so far. So, I believe naintindihan ng maigi, no? Yung pinag-discuss natin today. So, let me just refresh you again, no? So, what we have discussed. So, for today, we tried to start the maxima and minima, critical points, and extreme values of functions. No? So, we have worked with the Max Min theorem for continuous functions, no? So, it is important to bear in mind that there are requirements when working with theorems. No? So the first requirement for the Max Min theorem for continuous functions is that the function must be continuous, and the second is that the function at the interval must be closed. Okay, so if the interval is open, you have to reconsider asking yourself, no, kung applicable ba si Max Min theorem na, okay, I expect to find a maximum or a minimum, no, for this interval. This is open, no? And then I have presented to you 4 typical scenarios or cases, no? That is maximum and minimum at interior points, maximum and minimum at endpoints, maximum at interior point, and minimum at endpoint or endpoints, and then minimum at interior point, and then maximum at endpoints or endpoint. And then I've shown you some examples, no? So this is how you describe, for example, when applying the maximum theorem, you need to describe whether you can find the maximum at the interior point of the interval or at the end point, or the minimum at the interior and the minimum at the end point. No? And then we considered some examples, especially trigonometric functions. So I believe I have given you an instruction on how to plot trigonometric functions. So maybe when I give you a problem set, no, I will find some graphs, no, trigonometric graphs, no. I will make sure that I will be giving you trigonometric functions to work with. So, yan. So, make sure na natatanda kung paano mag-plot ng trigonometric functions. So, medyo magulo yung notes natin today, but I'll be sending this to you. So, for the seat work, the deadline is today, 8 p.m. Okay? So, I'll be asking your class representative to again add another folder for which you can upload your sheetworks. No? So make sure again na malinaw yung picture nyo sa gawa nyo, and make sure na as much as possible sa walang rulings na paper nyo isusulat yung notes. So kasi minsan yung mga sulat nyo minsan nakahiga na dun sa rulings ng papel ng A4 eh. So parang hindi ko na siya mabasa. Tapos make sure na malinis yung solution nyo, maganda tignan. Kasi nag-check ako minsan rumble yung mga solutions nyo and hindi ko na alam kung anong ginagawa nyo. So yun. Okay? So yan, so this is your seat work and must be submitted today, 8 p.m. So make sure then yung file naming, no, yung file names nyo, naka last name, first name, no, tapos nakasulat ko anong seat work to. Okay? And then if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask me, no? So you can ask me by simply asking your class representative to send your questions or queries to me. So again, so I have given a remark, no? So these remarks are important, no? Para it's like something like note, take note for something, look for this, look for that. So that's what remarks are for. So even a single point of discontinuity, I've mentioned na ayan. So minsan di nag-a-apply yung Max Min theorem kasi may discontinuities. Yeah, important na check yung requirements ng theorems. So also remember na we are talking about continuous functions, no? Continuous functions, we have discussed that long before the midterms exam, no? So bago mag-midterms, diniscuss ko maigi sa inyo kung paano malalaman na continuous yung functions. So I believe you still have your notes regarding that, and I will be looking for that, no? So on your answers. So, and lastly, okay, we discussed the local and absolute global extrema, and then I've given you a definition for the absolute extreme values. Okay? So I believe the next topic would be, let me just note on the next topic so we'll not be led astray. So we'll be discussing for the next meeting, local extreme values. So okay na tayo sa global, no? So let's now look forward to local extreme values. And then I will now show you how to find extremas. No? Basically, this is using derivatives. No? So lahat ng natutunan nyo sa derivatives, magagamit nyo yan. No? So I'll be giving you a lot of problems regarding this. No? So yun. Marami tayong problems for that. And then afterwards, please look forward or read in advance the mean value theorem. Mean value theorem. We also have Rolle's theorem. And then okay. So ayun, increasing functions. Okay, ang pangit na. Increasing functions. And decreasing functions. No? Decreasing functions. And yes, after that, I think that's it. After this, we'll move on to the first derivative test for local extreme values. So I think this is enough advanced reading for you, no? Kung gusto niyo mag-advanced reading, these are the topics that you should look for, no? So local extreme values and then finding extrema. So in this, so I'll be discussing this. So when the basically it is about local extreme values, kung ano kailan mo masasabi na global siya or local lang siya na extrema. And then for the finding extrema, basically this is using calculus only. So hindi mo na minsan kailangan mag-plot regarding this, no? So parang solve na lang to finding extrema. So we'll be using derivatives on this one. So please brush up your derivative skills. And then next on that line is the mean value theorem, no? So please read upon that, no? And the Rolle's theorem. So yung dalawang yan intertwined yan, very heavily related. And then ano pa ba? After that, we'll be discussing increasing and decreasing functions, and then the first derivative test for local extreme values. And I think that's all, no? So maybe this is a good place to stop, no? So are there any questions?